to the Future-Proof Public Transport Subcommittee. And Phil, I'll ask you for the opening karakia.
Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, mā kina ki uta, mā taratara ki tai, ehi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he ho hu, tihe mauri ora.
Thanks, Phil. We'll move on to apologies. And there are a number of those on the screen. If you can, thanks, Dave.
Good morning, everyone. We've received a number of apologies this morning, and that being Angus Hodgson, Kiwi Rail for lateness, and Councillor Andy Baker, Oliver Golden, Caroline Hopper, Angela O'Leary, and Maxine Van Oosten for absence.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Seconded by Sarah. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So agenda. So what it's been proposed, we change the order of a couple of items on the agenda, and it is moving. The proposition is to move item 7.4 up in front of 7.1. And that request is because the Waka Kotahi representative, Jess Andrews, is only able to be in the meeting for up to an hour. So that's the reason for that change. So if I could have someone move and second that. I've got Eugene and Adrian, you were. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Move on to disclosures of interest. Are there any matters on the agenda that members wish to declare an interest? No, there are not. Okay. We will now move to the first item on the agenda is the public forum, and we have 3 attending the forum. And first up is Pamela Chiles to discuss route changes in terms of bus services. So welcome, Pamela. So you have 5 minutes to present, and then there may be questions from members after you have presented.
Okay.
So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And over to you.
Thank you. Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank Mark Tamura and Dave Doggett for allowing me this time here to present to the committee. I live in near the corner of Carrington Avenue and Vestey Avenue in Hillcrest, and I used to take the Silverdale bus, but now I have to take the Meteor. I have no choice because I don't have a car and I don't have a bicycle and I don't have a scooter. So I just have to live with it. First of all, the Comet bus has been very successful, and it's a north-south route that goes directly through the city. And I would imagine that the council wanted to have a quicker east-west route, which is supposedly what the Meteor is. But when the Comet was launched, what happened was that the previous Mahoe and Glenview routes were combined and extended out to the base. So it meant that the people who lived in those areas could take the bus just as they were able to previously and go even further. But the Meteor, for me personally, is slower than the previous Silverdale bus. Not only because bus stops have been removed from my neighbourhood, and I now have a much longer walk down to Masters Avenue to catch the Meteor. That's just the first part that makes it slower. Yeah, the first time I took the Meteor, I got off the bus in the evening and it was a long walk. There was a headwind. I caught a cold. It was horrendous. Anyway, so then the Meteor goes up to Hillcrest Road and it's slower along Hillcrest Road because there are 2 roundabouts on Hillcrest Road. The bus always has to slow down to go through the roundabouts. There are also 2 pedestrian crossings on Hillcrest Road, and often there are university students or staff crossing the pedestrian crossing because that's the link from one side of the university to the other. Then the bus goes along Ruakura Road. It's a long way out from where the bus used to go. There are no bus stops there. And on either side of the road, there are no houses. There are the playing fields of the university, and on the other side is Ruakura. There is no reason for the bus to go there. Then the bus goes along Knighton Road, where the Orbiter goes, and then along Clyde Street. Now, because for such a long part of the route, it means that the Meteor is on the same route as the Orbiter. And so often there are people waiting at the bus stops along there. And so the Meteor has to slow down whenever someone is waiting at the bus stop because they might be waiting for the Meteor and they might be waiting for the Orbiter. So that happens all along Knighton Road where the buses go and on Clyde Street. Now, Clyde Street, that's very congested. There's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of other buses, not only the Orbiter, but also the Cambridge bus, the Matamata bus, the Tiaraha bus. They all go down Clyde Street. And also at the end of Clyde Street, where it meets Grey Street, there's a car park with the entrance off Clyde Street. So there are cars turning from Clyde Street into the car park and the buses have to slow down for the cars that are entering into Clyde Street. Also, the bus drivers are very polite. They wait for cars that are making a right turn from Clyde Street into the car park. So they have to stop and wait for the cars to enter or leave the car park on the corner of Clyde Street. So for all of these factors, it means that the Meteor bus is slower than the previous Silverdale bus. Okay, so.
Another minute, Pam, and that's it.
Okay, also that's the inbound Meteor. So when there's the outbound and the bus turns from Hillcrest Road into Mansell Avenue, has to slow down and almost stop because it's a very sharp turn. There's a kind of a traffic island that it has to dodge, and so it's very slow. I find that I'm using the bus less than I used to because previously, because the Silverdale bus was so convenient, when it was raining, I took the bus to the Bridge Street supermarket and then I was able to take the bus home again and I was able to carry my groceries without too much hassle. But now that there's a long walk to the bus stop, I've got some waterproof trousers and so I don't take the bus. I go to the Hillcrest supermarket. Also, I have a friend that I help out in Chartwell. And so I used to take the Silverdale bus to Clyde Street and then take the Orbiter to her place in Chartwell. But now, instead of having the 11-minute walk from my house to where the Meteor nearest bus stop is, what I do is I decide to take a 25-minute walk through the university and catch the orbiter on Knighton Road. Also, and
Your time is up, so if you can just conclude and finish off. Thank you.
okay, there's also congestion where the bus travels on Massey Street on what used to be the Frankton end of the Meteor. So that slows it down. And also there are residents that live on Wellington Street who used to get on the bus where the Silverdale bus used to go with walkers. So they have to somehow or other go to Clyde Street, and I don't know how they're getting on. Also, the people in Mansell Avenue, they're very unhappy because they have a bus going down their street every 7.5 minutes, and there's no bus stop on their street. They took the Cambridge Road bus previously anyway. I could go on.
I thank you, and I did allow you extra time.
Okay.
Do you have some notes there that you can leave with staff?
Okay, well, it's just that where I live in Carrington Avenue, the Eastern End, there used to be houses built there in the 1960s, but now they're taking them all away or demolishing them, and they're putting up infill housing. So
anything you have got that you wanted to leave with staff, because that you'll get a response in due course, but if there was anything that you have read from that you can leave with staff, that was, I was asking in terms of that information that you've outlined.
No.
Okay, no, that's fine. Before you depart your chair, I just check if members had any questions. Sarah.
I just wanted to say thank you to you, Pamela, for coming to raise these issues and concerns, and we really appreciate it, and we will have a talk with staff around that you've raised.
Angela, no,
Pamela, just
Pamela,
one,
please.
sorry. Yeah, thank you also for coming in. It's always good to hear from residents when we do make changes. So in your opinion, would bus priority on those pinch points make a difference to your journey?
It would make a slight difference, but the fact that bus stops have been removed from my high density population neighbourhood is the worst aspect of it.
Okay. Nothing further, but no, thanks very much in terms of your presentation. And as I outlined, there'll be a response back to you in terms of the matters you've raised. So we'll now move on to the next presentation from Jovi Taylor, Hamilton Girls High School. And for members, you were circulated with an addendum to the agenda in terms of the information that has been prepared by Jovi and her fellow students. So welcome.
Thank you.
And you have 10 minutes, and then there may be questions from members after your presentation.
I'd just like to thank Angela as well as Dave for giving me access to these resources and being able to sit before you all to express my issue. So kia ora, my name is Jovi Taylor, and I stand before you today representing myself, my group, and all the students from Hamilton Girls High School who have so far shown support in our social action. Let me refresh your memory on the NZQA Social Studies standard for Level 3 students. For Level 3 students of those who are in high school, there is a 3.4 assessment, which entails examining personal involvement in a social action that aims to influence policy changes. This means that we are expected to conduct research on a policy that we want to try to change. This can be at the local or national level, and it can include specific rules or practices that we believe should be changed to help others in society. My group decided on confronting the issues around catching the bus, and in our In our proposal, you may have noticed 3 words consistently used to describe the experience around the bus for transport to and or from school: inconvenient, unreliable, and inaccessible. I won't go over the content of the proposal, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end of my presentation. With Hamilton Girls High School set in the heart of the city, public transport serves as the obvious mode of transport for students, especially those out of zone, without their own form of private transportation, or those who don't have the privilege of being dropped off and picked up by a parent or guardian. Everyone in the group that is not here, has either arrived late to class or had to leave early to catch the bus at some point. And throughout my 5 years at Hamilton Girls High School, I've had to deal with all the difficulties of catching the bus, including long periods of waiting, missing my bus, being approached by strange figures at the transport centre or my bus stop, and having my bus fail to appear on occasion. Some of these things are unavoidable, such as me forgetting my B card and becoming stranded on the side of the road before school. But for those instances that can be helped, like waiting around for long periods of time and showing up to destinations late, my group decided to take initiative and inquire about the extent of the problem at my school and what specifically needed to be changed in order to make the public transport experience better for students, teachers, and education. My first point is that the Ministry of Transport was quick to address the driver shortage. They offered bus drivers not only better wages, but also better working conditions in general, as well as more training opportunities for those that were interested in bus driving. This was clearly an attempt to make the job to appear desirable, which would imply that more buses would be on the road. Although the Meteor bus was introduced and has served as a great additional connection to the heart of the city, none of the more heavily used student-based buses have been supported. This leads me to my next point. Many students are unable to safely walk to the transport centre and catch their bus on time due to the number of buses on the road at the moment, as well as the reduced bus timetables. On a random school day, I took time out of class to walk from the furthest point, our gym, to the transport centre at a reasonable pace, and I discovered that at the end of the day, when buses leave, skipped a line, that the walk from school to the transport centre turned out to be 11 minutes and 47 seconds. Students are unable to safely walk to the bus at the end of the day when buses leave at the time of the school bell or only up to 10 minutes later, forcing them to make mad dashes and jaywalk to catch the bus. This endangers themselves and others. I doubt any of you would want to have to sprint to catch your bus after work, especially since you get paid for your efforts at work and we are forced to be there for 6 hours. Many high school students find it difficult to wait around town for long periods of time after school, and this can be a safety issue for young women especially. As you'll see from the proposal sheet and all of our evidence, city routes can take an hour or more to arrive, and students taking regional buses must catch the first bus right after school or risk waiting until 5 or 6 p.m. This causes significant problems for both students and the council, with students not being able to relax before diving into their studies and homework, and the council having to deal with teenagers like myself who are notorious for our misbehaviour. This includes loitering, graffiti, and stealing or shoplifting. And no, don't worry, I don't initiate in any of these activities, but I am aware of how particularly our juniors have behaved in public. Because of the actions of our juniors and a few seniors, of course, our students have become a nuisance to Centre Place and other local establishments, causing strained relationships between Hamilton Girls High School, local businesses, and public spaces. This has resulted in numerous phone calls to the school concerning the behaviour. As a result, we would like the 1 Pukere, 2 Silverdale, 3 Dinsdale, 13 University, 18 Te Rapa, and 19 Bremworth/Trimbleview routes to be departing 5 to 10 minutes later than they currently do. These are the routes that depart either before or at the end of the day of the school. We would like to see the bus times for the 4 Flagstaff, 11 Fairfield, 12 Fitzroy, and 17 Hamilton Gardens to University pushed back by 5 to 10 minutes because they all arrive 15 minutes or later after school ends. For the students who take the regional buses, we would like to express an interest in more buses being in circulation on their respective routes before and after school, as students typically only have one option for when they get to and from school. The arrival times before school leave students either arriving at a specific time before school or even during school times. Meanwhile, the wait times, as you've seen, take an hour or more after school for students to catch. So my group and I would like to see more buses for the 20 Cambridge, 22 Eastern Connector, 23 Raglan, and the 24 Te Awamutu be moved, have more in circulation. I hope you'll all agree that it is crucial to encourage people to keep using buses as it is the best and most efficient type of transportation, considering the increasingly threatening impacts of climate change and carbon emissions. Moreover, with an increase in people using buses, there will be less cars on the road, which means less congestion and traffic. Finished.
Thanks very much, Jovi, and well done in terms of your presentation. So I'll open it up for questions. I've got Mayor Adrian.
Morning, Jovi. That was a lot of work gone into this, and I congratulate you for that, because it you've worked on some facts to obviously provide a really clear position where you find yourself. What is the role of Girls High at the moment? Would you know that roughly?
With bus, in terms of the relationship.
I
with
just, and
buses?
it's how many, what is the role of the school? I've got a few questions I just want to try and
There-
clarify.
roughly, I think it's 2,500 roughly-ish. It could be more.
It's
Not
a
quite
lot
sure.
more than what it was when I was there. Okay, what, and I guess the thing is too, is with that 2,500, obviously there's about 130 hostel girls.
Yeah,
Which I was
exactly.
one, once upon a time, but how many out of zone students are there, do you think?
We were told to have a look into that, but there was a bit of an implication with that because we were looking into how many people were on the regional buses, and obviously we'd want to know, well, are there going to be more people that are coming in, enrolling for next year, or staying in general that are on the buses? And I was unable to look into that,
Yeah, and
unfortunately,
that's
just also because we don't know how many of those people that are outside region, out of zone, that are taking the buses. So yeah, it would just be a bit inaccurate there.
You know, it's just interesting that the school's so large now, and the impact on, like for local students. That's great. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks, Jovi. That was excellent presentation, and yeah, I read through all the information you provided, and those interviews and things were really insightful. So thank you. So I guess what impact has the reduced schedule had since COVID? Went from every half hour to an hour.
I'd say definitely that people don't want to take the bus. I know there's a lot of complaints from girls who are just whining. And I was a part of that group because reduced bus timetables meant that it was hourly and stuff. Even if it wasn't for school, I was here waiting on the side of the road like, man, when's my bus going to show up? I need to be somewhere. And there's just a lot of stress that piles up on that as well with taking the bus and those times that weren't regular like usual. And in addition to that, just, you need to get to places, and if you can't get there on time, then that's not really a good thing.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of increasing funding to improve frequency, but also that sits with the regional council, and then improving the infrastructure, for example, crossings, bus stops, or bus lanes, that sits with Hamilton City Council. And so while this committee gives direction, it's the full councils that make the funding decisions, and they've got their long-term plans coming up. So I do know much about the long-term plan process and how Hamilton Girls High School students could be involved in that.
I do not, sorry, but I'd be happy to be a part of that, obviously, because we've had lots of support for it. And even just like me and my group, we all went to tutor classes just randomly, be like, hey, sign our petition. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this is like, oh my gosh, please, yes. And then they're like, is it actually happening? And then we're like, we'll see.
Yeah.
See if it can happen.
Okay. Maybe if democracy, or I'm happy to give you guidance, or democracy can provide more information around that. But
Definitely. Well, we definitely didn't expect it to go to this extent with our group, so it's very appreciative just to be here as well, to see it go this far, because usually our assessments don't obviously reach to this level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liz.
Yeah, look, again, thanks for coming in today. It's really great to hear from you.
Thank you.
Hey, so I have actually been watching this space with quite some interest, actually. And I think that it probably is some time there's a need for some analysis actually of how our students who are regional are accessing the city.
Yeah.
So what I see at the moment, of course, is for Waipa, Cambridge and Te Awamutu, we're going to see an increase of services from 2024, which is absolutely brilliant. And I think that will work really, really well for students who are in school in the city, but live out in the region.
Yeah.
And I see a busload of every school pass through Halpo every day and also through Cambridge. So this is one bus for St. John's College, one bus for Girls High, one bus for every single school.
Yeah.
It's a lot of students coming from out of the region
Yeah,
into the
definitely.
city. So, but I sense some changes coming now. So as the city roles are increasing, my understanding is that some schools will be prioritising city students and the regional students will not be preferential students necessarily. So with those changes coming up, I think it's time for a bit of an analysis to see, hey, what does the future look like? Because I sense a real change.
Yeah.
You know, what we want to do is try and plan in advance. So I'm just kind of highlighting that as a bit of an issue that I see kind of coming. But look,
Yeah,
really,
definitely.
really great to hear from you today.
Thank you.
And thank you for raising the Cambridge situation, because I know that it
Definitely.
has caused some angst out there as
Yeah.
well. And look, we certainly want to make sure that we're maximising every opportunity for students who are travelling on buses to, you know, if we need to put on more services and there's a need and a desire for that, then we should absolutely be doing that.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing like seeing 20 parents, caregivers all lining up outside a city school, all coming from a regional, you know, Te Araha, Morrinsville, Madam, wherever. Just doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah.
So, yeah. that's good.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jovi. Yeah, from the moment you made contact and then spoke to myself and Jennifer, yeah, we were both really impressed with the level of detail that you had gone into, you and your group. So yeah, so thank you for yeah, approaching us, and yeah, so we could give you the opportunity to take it further. Yeah, what I really do like about your analysis is that while you're focused today on Hamilton Girls High School, and which makes sense given the proximity to the transport centre, you've also outlined other schools as well,
Yeah.
where we could make more efficiencies as well within Hamilton. And yeah, so thank you for all that work. I'm sure our staff will find it really helpful and useful. Yeah, just on the Girls High one though, yeah, there is a lot of talk about zoning, but I think Girls High is that sort of outlier school with zoning, because their zone is so small
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
so industrial that they do naturally get a wider catchment anyway. So yeah, whatever we can do, you know, to enable that behaviour change and for people to have a good experience of catching the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we will look at your suggestions and yeah, hopefully look to make some changes. And I know that you're currently a year 13
Yeah.
student, so you know, these changes will impact people coming after you. So thank you to
Definitely.
you and your group for even though it won't benefit you per se, having the initiative to look longer term and outside of your own benefits. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jennifer, yes.
Thank you, Jovi, and second a lot of what's been said, but it's actually a question for Phil. And that was, I'm mindful that a lot of the time planning can be done for certain groups of demographics. And so sometimes we plan for commuters more, sometimes we could plan for around schools more. What do we do for our services when we analyze these route changes? Are we going for one particular group, or are both the categories I've mentioned kind of what we use? Just mindful that with the more affordable fares for young people and the fact that they literally aren't allowed to drive, it's obviously a good group to prioritise.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Our analysis ahead of any changes to routes attempts to understand the needs of all of the user groups that are wanting to actively use our services. So in the reports that you see, I hope that you see us providing some assessment of that in the way that we present future solutions. And I think we could always do more in that space, but we do follow a process of trying to make sure that any changes we make are a benefit to as wide a group as possible. Picking up the suggestion, if you'd like us to respond to you with a report, maybe to a future meeting around this issue and do some of the analysis that Councillor Stolwick mentioned, then that would be something we could present back to you in terms of those longer distance school moves and how they are actively using our networks. Then we'd be happy to do that.
Thanks, Phil. There's no further questions or comments. So thanks very much, Jovi. And just acknowledging in terms of the work and effort that you and your fellow students have put in to this matter, the analysis and the survey work that you'd undertaken, because I think, as Mayor Adrian said, it's always good to have some evidence in terms of the matters that are being highlighted. So if you could pass on to your fellow students also and thank them for the effort.
Definitely. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. So we'll now move to the next presentation in the public forum. That's the Future is Rail. So we've got Lindsey and Darren. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Lindsey Horne, and I'm joined by my fellow advocate and colleague, Darren Davis, who's here today. He's going to help answer any technical questions that you might have. But yeah, as was mentioned, I'm part of an organisation called The Future is Rail. We're a nationwide organisation, and our vision is to see a national strategy for interregional passenger rail across Aotearoa, and one that is integrated, one that is accessible, and one that is affordable for people as well. Some of you may have come to our conference that we ran earlier in the year. So that was a sellout conference of over 2,000 people in Wellington. So that's just on the second slide if you want to have a little look at that. And on the third slide, you'll also see that that was attended by regional councillors from around the country, as well as all major political parties. And one of the things that was most heartening to hear at that conference was just how much the landscape has changed for interregional passenger rail in Aotearoa. And a big part of that is obviously Te Huia's success as well. And so really hearing about how there's a real appetite for interregional passenger rail and how it really is feeling like the landscape is changing for that to continue to grow across the country, which is really exciting. Cool. So before we get into what we'd like to present, we also just wanted to say a massive congratulations and kudos to the Waikato region. You're really, really leading the way here, and it makes our job as advocates really a lot easier to point to an exemplar case. So for example, we've got a really active team down in Otago that's calling for the return of the Southerner, and to be able to point to something like Te Huia as an exemplar really makes a big difference. We recently presented to Bay of Plenty, and obviously trying to get a connection from Tauranga and the Mount through to Hamilton and then on to Auckland is just obviously so much stronger when we already have the Te Huia in existence as well. And at the conference, some of you may have heard about how other regional councils are really looking to learn from Te Huia as well. And we know that it's been a long and staunch effort to get it here. So just want to acknowledge yourselves and your predecessors as well, who have fought really staunchly for it as well. So we're really excited about that and show a lot of support for what you have done and what you would like to do in the future with it as well. Cool. So in terms of today, what we would like to do is check in with you around what future expansion for Te Huia could be. It's probably things that you are already considering or thinking about, but we'd like to be here to talk through what those are. It would be remiss of us not to share those, and also to express our support for these as well. So just onto the next slide. So that was our congratulatory slide. And sorry, just onto the next one then. Cool. So the first opportunity of 4 that we'd like to point out is leveraging the Lower North Island rolling stock bid. So it's really exciting for us to know that the Lower North Island is going to be purchasing tri-mode stock. We think there's a real opportunity for the Waikato region to get in on this bid so you can get them at a lower price than if you were to bid by yourselves, and particularly could consider getting bi-mode stock. The reason we're suggesting is that so you have an opportunity to get into Britomart station and move beyond just the Strand. I mean, the Strand is okay, but obviously if you can get into Britomart, that's really ideal because then you're obviously connecting into a much greater integrated transport plan. Currently, the Strand has no connecting buses and no connecting active modes as well. So if you can get into the Strand, that would be great. Also, as part of City Rail Link opening, only 2 of the 4 platforms will be in use. So we believe that there could actually be access into Britomart when City Rail Link opens. Cool. So that is the first opportunity. So just onto the next slide, thank you, is thinking more about integrated public transport. So we know that Rotokauri has some good connecting bus services, but it's really Frankton that we would like you to consider about having greater feeder services to that station. It makes sense to have integrated transport to your to your train stations. So getting those feeder services going as well. Currently, we believe that the Tikawiti and Tokoroa buses are parked there during the day, but are not actually in use. So it's kind of like there's these forbidden fruit buses that could be in use. So having those feeder services to actually feed the Tahui would be excellent. So that's on the bus side of things, but also, again, having integrated transport. So we would love to see secure bike parking. You could think about having scooter like parking bays as well. So really thinking about it as an integrated service as well would be excellent. Same goes for at the Strand if you can't get into Britomart as well. Cool. So just onto the next slide, thanks. Okay, this is where things get fun. Okay, we really believe that connecting Tahuia through to Palmerston North and then beyond into Wellington for the central connection is a really, really great opportunity. This is a big part of the electrified line as well. So again, if you're thinking about emissions and VKT reduction, obviously this is a really long trip where you'll get a lot of big bang for your buck. So if you can connect onto this service, it's an electrified line. There's a lot of existing stations along here that the Northern Explorer stops, but there's also stations that could be reopened. So for example, Taihape and Fielding as well. So there's additional stations that could be reopened onto this. And then, yeah, connecting it through to the capital connection, we essentially have a really amazing main trunk line opened up and could potentially open up, you know, that Auckland to Wellington route. So this is a really exciting proposition here. So our recommendation to you would be that you support Horizon's bid for the central connection, their detailed business case. So that's what we would recommend there as well. There's also a government policy statement funding pool for interregional public transport. So we recommend that you jump in on that. There's an existing pool of money that is there for interregional public transport. It's there for these kinds of services. And we see this as a really key opportunity to be a part of. Okay, next slide, thanks. And the last one, my hometown, Tauranga. I mean, wouldn't you like to jump on a train to the Mount? It would just be great. So yeah, connecting that service from Kirikiriroa through to Tauranga and to the Mount, you could stop in Morrinsville, in Matamata, potentially in Omokoroa if that's of interest to the Bay of Plenty. So again, we recommend that you actually make a joint business case with Bay of Plenty for this. The reason we're recommending that is that a lot of the actual train line is in the Waikato region, so it could potentially make sense for that to be a joint detailed business case to really explore that option. And I believe it was in last year's budget, they have announced the detailed business case for the electrification of that line again. So if you're thinking emissions, if you're thinking VKT, that's also another really great opportunity there, not to mention the connections through Waikato University as well. Cool, so those are our 4 key recommendations. So just the next slide, thanks. So yeah, a real opportunity, and just one that, as I mentioned at the very start, you know, we have seen this big change in the interregional rail landscape, so we don't want to let these opportunities pass us by. Now is a really good time to seriously consider these and act on these. Next slide, thanks. So again, just a reminder of our specific asks. So that would be leveraging the Lower North Island rolling stock bid, feeding Te Huia with connecting buses and active modes through secure bike parking, supporting Horizon's bid for the detailed business case for that central connector, and developing a joint business case with Bay of Plenty for Golden Rail, passenger rail. I think that would be amazing. Just to the next slide, thanks. I'll just go through this really, really briefly. There's a whole lot of reasons around why we should care more about interregional passenger rail that I'm sure the people in the room here really understand. But just as a reminder, emissions reduction, again, we're talking about long distances. We're not just talking about 2K trips, which are really important, but VKT reduction, when you think about these long trips, you get a big bang for your buck with these long trips. It's a really safe way to travel. It's a really resilient way to travel, especially if we're thinking about more extreme weather events. In Kaikoura, it took 9 months to open up the rail lines as opposed to 17 months for the motorway. There's a lot of public support for this. In the parliamentary inquiry, 97% of the 1,800 submissions were in favour for this, and you've all seen the support for Te Huia, so there is a lot of public support for this. There's co-benefits for freight. It's an affordable way to travel and opens up those social benefits, and it's obviously a great way to connect those economies across the Golden Triangle as well. Next slide, thanks. And just to add to this as well, in terms of why now and why this is actually quite urgent and why we would really like you to consider it during your long-term planning process, is because we are seeing that Horizons and Bay of Plenty are eager for this as well. We're seeing a lot of support from those councils, so you've got some willing parties to work with. Obviously now is the season of the RLTP, so it's good to be considering this here and now. As we mentioned in the government policy statement, there's literally a pool of money for these kinds of detailed business cases that you can draw upon. And there's also that business case for Bay of Plenty electrification. Cool. So kia ora everyone. We don't want to let these opportunities, there's multiple, pass us by. So just wanted to say a big thank you, and also to offer our support on behalf of the Future is Rail. If there's anything that we can do to support your initiatives in this space, it's what we love to do. So kia ora, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Very clear. So I'll open it up for any. Mayor Adrian and Chair Pamela.
It was like a speed.
It was.
Like, get in there. Put on the accelerator. Sorry. No, great, interesting presentation. Just with regard to the Tauranga Auckland leg, obviously you're aware of the limitations of the Kaimai Tunnel. What are your thoughts? What do you know? What are you thinking in that space? I'm curious, just want to get some clarity from where you're coming from with that, and of course with the electrification of a small tunnel.
Yeah, sure. I guess that's why we have these detailed business processes, is to actually flesh all of that out as well. But I'd say that the detailed business case helps get to that. I'll pass to Darren.
Hey, so I'm Darren Davis. Just for clarification, I'm here in my personal capacity, not in my professional capacity, because I pop up like a mushroom in various Hamilton projects. So Kaimai Tunnel issue is around sort of ventilation in a long tunnel, longest tunnel in New Zealand, sort of run by diesel trains. Currently, there are similar length tunnels with passenger service in. There's the Otira Tunnel on the Midland Line in the South Island, and the Remutuka Tunnel on the Wairarapa Line. Those are kind of authorised for passenger operation and sort of legacy or sort of grandparented rules. First thing is that, you know, electrification basically solves that issue. My understanding is those tunnels were built with clearance for electrification. Can't exactly guarantee that. In terms of rail to Bay of Plenty, that will be a crunchy issue to address. Similarly, on the Bay of Plenty side, Waikato's invested in passing loops on the East Coast Main Trunk Line, sort of within Waikato, and there's sort of reasonable capacity sort of within the Waikato, but the Bay of Plenty side could be a positive. On a more positive note, Tauranga City Council, through its planning, has set aside a site that it controls that's adjacent to the rail, just at the northern end of Tauranga City Centre, for a revived sort of Tauranga station. But I think it's a great opportunity. It's got some technical issues and some infrastructure investments, and particularly in a tunnel that would be needed to support that. But you know, that's like anything.
Yeah, Pamela.
Kia ora. Hey, thank you so much, Lindsay and Darren, for your very clear and coherent presentation. I love a really clean ask, right? We know what you're coming to ask of us, and that's always really helpful in a presentation. So thank you for that. I hear your call for our engagement as Waikato Regional Council, in particular with the Lower North Island rolling stock bed. We are engaged in that process. I suppose that a challenge that we face as a council is the recognition that the additional funding that Waka Kotahi has provided for the startup of this service inevitably it comes to an end at some point, right? And so how do we bridge that gap so that we can continue the service going forward? And I recognize your comment about the ability now to access funding for interregional public transport, and that's fantastic. Am interested in your endeavors to engage with Auckland Council. Waikato Regional Council representatives were recently up presenting to Auckland Council, making the case for the value that Te Huia provides, both for Auckland region and the Waikato region, and asking for their engagement in particular, well, in funding this service going forward. Just wondering if you have plans to present to Auckland Council the same fantastic coherent presentation to see if they've got an appetite to come on board.
As a professional Jaffa born in the great metropolis to your north, with our campaign, the least engagement we've got with our campaign is in Auckland, and that's a real problem. Auckland, wonderful place, very centred on Auckland's importance and how, in my humble view, that the rest of the country owes Auckland a living. Auckland has also been very successful at getting sort of large amounts of public funding for metro rail upgrades. But one of the problems we have in Auckland is that the Waikato region doesn't have a voice on the timetable committee for Te Huia, so it needs to do that by proxy through Kiwi Rail or for Auckland Transport or Auckland One Rail. The Auckland Rail network is very, very busy, and I had an excruciatingly slow trip out of Auckland on Te Huia 2 nights ago to get there. So you've been up to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee at Auckland Council. Our esteemed mayor had an interesting response to that, but you know, he always has interesting responses. But I think you made a very good point. Auckland is a beneficiary of Te Huia because it generates ability for people to go to work in Auckland, to go to events in Auckland, to spend money in Auckland, yet we don't contribute to its operation, even though we're the beneficiary of it. So I think you've given us a very good ask of us, is that we should be advocating to Auckland Council and Auckland Transport. So we'll take that on board.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And also would really love to see your support for electrification of that line between Hamilton and Auckland. I think that's going to also facilitate further development of that passenger rail prospect.
Yeah, and certainly your support for upper North Waikato stations and Tuakau, potentially Pokeno, and sort of further down the track at Te Kauwhata. Might be a question for Kiwi Rail, but there was meant to be a business case in year 3 of the current rail network infrastructure program for double tracking the remaining single track sections through the Whangamarino Swamp and the Ngaruawahia Bridge. That would both speed up operation, but also increase capacity.
And I suppose, sorry, Mr. Chair, one more. I also really appreciate your encouragement for Waikato to be working more closely with Bay of Plenty. We are there is a reinitiation of UNISA, which is the Upper North Island Strategic Alliance that includes Northland, Auckland, Waikato, and Bay of Plenty. And I assure you that transportation is a key component of those conversations, and rail is a fundamental fixture of that, both in terms of freight and in passenger movement as well. So we certainly are advocating on your behalf for a more joined up approach to how we move people and things as efficiently and effectively as we can across the entire Upper North Island. Kia ora.
Thank you. Now I've got Eugene and then I've got Angus online and then we will need to move on to the other items.
Sorry, just a quick addendum to what I forgot to present as well. Just want to tautoko what Darren was saying around our support for Upper North Island stations as well. Very supportive of Te Kauwhata, Pōkeno and Tuako as well. Very in support of that as well.
Eugene.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I probably won't have to talk too much about this now, but good responses to Chair Pamela's comments there. But I was talking about the North Waikato the business case that's happening now, and then seeking funding through L2P through the for the detailed business case. So you're obviously well aware of all what's going on there. So really do seek your support, because as affordability, funding constraints that we're all facing, it's getting tougher and tougher. So we need that voice and that advocacy to continue to promote, because nothing's cheaper. A business case costs many dollars just to get to that next stage. So really would like to have a chat offline sometime about how you can support us and moving forward through our L2P progression. And yeah, great work, great presentation, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. That would be great. Would love to do that.
Angus.
If there was any potential to present, to a, we'd be happy to do that.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much, Lindsey and Darren, for that excellent presentation. I just thought I'd respond to or make a comment from KiwiRail on behalf on a couple of the issues raised. Just reiterating a very good answer from both of you on the Kaimai Tunnel. And I think, Darren, you said, I believe there was provision for space for electrification inside that tunnel. Just confirming, yes, there is. When it was designed in the 70s, they designed it with enough room at the top to be able to run a cable. So that is still a potential. We don't need a brand new tunnel in order to electrify through the Kaimais. They would use the existing tunnel. We also have funding as part of budget 2023. The Rail Network Investment Program this financial year, got a top up so that we could start the detailed design and business casing for further electrification in the North Island. Now, clearly, if you follow a demand modelling pathway, it would tell you that the Golden Triangle is ripe for the picking as being pretty high on the priority list of places that you'd electrify first, especially given we are currently extending Auckland's electrified network down to Pukekohe. So it's pretty obvious that that's the place that we're already looking at, and that's the area that would need to be electrifying in order to get passengers through there. Clearly, you'd need to electrify it first, and clearly that will take us quite a while, because it's a major infrastructure investment. It's a major infrastructure project that also needs a business case finished in order for government to be able to turn their mind to it, and also for the region as well to turn their mind to it too. So we're a wee while away from it, but the potential's there, and everyone understands the benefits of it, not just for passengers as well, I'd add. It also would mean that the rail hauled out of Port of Tauranga, which is of course New Zealand's largest export port, would be hauled by an electric locomotive and therefore zero emissions. So it's a pretty compelling prize, I'd say, for all of New Zealand. On the Te Kauwhata piece, yes, that is a business case that we have. I actually don't have an update immediately on what we're doing with it. I'm told that it was identified in the ARNT, but has been progressed out of the, it's in the Ministry of Transport. It got picked up from the Ministry of Transport's business case. They did a piece of work. I know that this particular region has been asking for an update from the Ministry on where that business case is at. So have we. I'm just being reminded. So
I think that would be a really good request for us to make of our colleagues in the Ministry of Transport, because it would be good to have that piece of information finalised, so we have the information and can move forward. And then on the AT piece, just for the sake of absolute clarity, we are doing a strategic rail program. You may have seen articles in the last few months about the work that KiwiRail and Auckland Transport have done to inform that long-term vision for how do we get the best out of our major city, Auckland, and make the best use of our rail infrastructure for the benefit of everybody. And just for everyone's sake, in our long-term modelling, where we talk about the time slots available for all services, being metro passenger rail services, freight services running through Auckland, there is also provision for interregional services to be there during the peak hours. They have not been forgotten about. They are an absolutely critical piece, because to Darren and Lindsay's point, Auckland benefits from people being able to move into that city for spending, for working, for living. We haven't forgotten about it. Just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Angus. Last question, Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for indulging me. Yeah, thank you, Lindsay and Darren, for presenting today. Just to sort of follow along from comments already made, would you be open to speaking to everyone's LTPs in the upcoming round? Similar presentation to what you've done today, or responding to yeah, just that need to keep rail and at the forefront of everyone's mind. Just bearing in mind that the people around this table are completely different to the people around everyone else's council tables, and yeah, such a succinct presentation and articulate points of view would be greatly appreciated for our other councillors who aren't here today. So would you be open to circulating your contact details at the appropriate time?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in fact doing a little bit of training for our members on how to engage with the long-term plan, RLTP processes, just so, because it's really clear that you have an ask, a clear ask, and that you're respectful of people's time.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And just for staff, I suppose ensuring that our RLTPs are linked up with our neighbouring regions as well in this matter. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Phil, any comments you'd like to make before?
So yes, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. So many of the topics that have been presented today are things that we are actively working on. And there have been regular reports to this committee around Te Huia, but it just so happens that there isn't one on this agenda. So there will be one to the next meeting, and I think we can give you an update on many of those actions. In terms of the RLTP for us, there are several projects in there related to Te Huia, and we're prioritising those alongside wider regional package. And that will be coming through to the Regional Transport Committee meeting in a couple of weeks' time. But we, in addition, are also working closely with our neighbours in other regions on aligning the points and the prioritisation to make sure that we're putting forward a solid case across the whole of the North Island on this topic.
Phil, and also just following up Angus's suggestion in terms of that request to MOT, in terms of an update on business case work.
Yes, well, we'll take that forward.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Lindsay and Darren. Really good discussion. There are some matters or suggestions that have been provided for you to follow up, and obviously, as Phil's outlined, there'll be some follow-up and further discussions from around the table and the partners, and then reporting back and discussions at our next meeting. So thanks very much. And just acknowledging, and I think some members have acknowledged that, the clarity of the presentation and the focus of that, because it just makes it so much easier in terms of understanding and the particular focus on the range of matters that you have raised. So thanks very much.
Thank you, and thank you for our action points too.
We'll go away and work on them now.
Okay. Now, we will move to item 6, confirmation of minutes of our meeting on the 25th of August. And on the way past, I'd just like to acknowledge and thank Angela for chairing that meeting because I was unable to make it. So if I could have someone to move in second who was at the meeting. Okay, thanks, Liz. Thanks. Second by Sarah. Any matters requiring clarification? No. I'll Angela. Okay, no, well, we'll do that. Second by Angela. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against, carried. And then we've got the receipt, item 6.2. Oh, we have. Oh, that's, oh. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Okay, we'll now move to the rearranged order of the agenda, and we'll move to item 7.4. Phil, this relates to the update on SURF and the VKT reduction funding. There is. Okay, Phil. Welcome, Sarah and Phil.
Favourite double act.
Okay, you kicking off, Sarah?
Yeah, so we'll largely take the paper as read, but this is an update on where we are in relation to both VKT plan funding and SURF funding. Many of you will be aware that that's been placed on pause by the Ministry of Transport, and this paper outlines the impact on both the Metro Spatial Plan planning process, but also the transport choices packages of the various councils in this room.
Okay. I've just Jess, was given you're online still,
Awesome.
and there are time constraints. If you had any particular comments at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just getting the right camera. Yeah, look, I really appreciate the chance to chat and sort of got background noise. What I guess want to point out is obviously this has been really frustrating, and this has been really a bit of a challenge, a real challenge. But I think the role for this committee and the leadership it can provide there is to look at what the opportunity is to keep us moving through this time of political change and to keep the momentum on the program. I think with governments changing, we know what's coming at us now. There's a real opportunity to focus on the real core values of MSP and what it's set up to succeed. And to make sure that we have a narrative, we're clear on the purpose of this, which is something that endures beyond political priorities and is crucial to the kind of ongoing success of Hamilton. And I think I'd love to see the conversation focus on that and to see that we have that leadership from our from the elected members and from our governors to do that. And I know that as Waka Kotahi, we're really focused on continuing to support and do that. We're putting a lot of effort into getting through the process of the NLTP and making sure this is prioritised through that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Mayor Adrian.
Say today for some reason. I guess I'm just looking forward because obviously we do want to advocate, but what are the risks here? Like, what's the next step if the funding is sort of not there? Do we need to reflect on the priorities, or will that just be something that will happen after we have that certainty? Because at the moment we're living in a bit of a vacuum of uncertainty. So is it a case of just, well, let's just sit in a holding pattern for a while, or is there a priority of where the investment needs to go? Because there mightn't be enough money and we can't scattergun it a bit everywhere. Is it a case of, well, these are the key points and we can achieve this here rather than just spread bits everywhere? It's just me just trying to get my head around what the process looks like going forward.
Sarah.
Yeah, through the chat. So there's two components to this. I think component number one, which is more my wheelhouse, is the impact on the Metro Spatial Plan, in particular the work that's about planning what the next 12 years kind of looks like for all of us and how to align our programs more effectively to deliver that bigger bang for your buck.
kind of approach. So we're already trying to work, and Waka Kotahi staff have been working with us to try and understand how to do that piece of work for less money, more insourcing, putting a bit more pressure on ourselves to come up with a streamlined approach to that planning. For transport choices, I think the issue is that if it's not coming out of SURF and it doesn't look like it's going to be coming out of NLTP, where's it going to come from? And I think we all know that LTP budgets are going to be constrained. That's talked about a bit more in the LTP alignment paper. But yeah, I think for transport choices, I don't know whether there is an approach that looks across the board and says, should we do that more here or there? Because if the funding goes, it's gone. So we are kind of in a holding pattern with that at the moment.
And I think on that, yeah, we just simply, as to whether there'll be a reprioritisation or availability of that funding, yeah, it is a pause, and obviously we're as eager as you are today to find out the form of our incoming government and their priorities, and I think that will allow us then to have a conversation with them about the future for those funding opportunities outside of the NRTF. And until then, we know about as much as you do. So, you know, we remain optimistic there will be an opportunity outside, or if not through it, there will be through the NRTF, but we just don't know yet.
I've got it, Angela and Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah, just had a question around regional council with our real-time information screens, which we've been hearing about for about 4 years. And I get emails quite often, when are they coming, from members of the public, bus users who desperately need them. What are the risks for our council? I see that we've already entered into a contract. Would that not have been far enough along for it not to have been paused? Or what are the risks for us to have to self-fund this?
So, yeah, I mean, we have been working with Waka Kotahi to try and confirm where they are with approving our funding for this. So, I don't have another update on that yet. Trudy Knight will probably know more about that than I will, because she's contracting it. But yeah, it is a risk, and Jess will probably potentially have an idea as to where Waka Kotahi might be on that process as well. But yeah.
Jess, would you like to respond also?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I can give a bit of an update. And we are in the unfortunate position that Regional Council entered into the commercial contracts before signing the agreement for the funding. And that is put all of us in a really awkward position because of the timing, and luckily ended up clashing with the pause in funding. We are going back to have another conversation to see if there is a way to unlock that funding. But if I'm honest, that is not looking promising, and it is unlikely that we'll get an exception granted here. So we'll continue to work with them, but yeah, they do, you know, with things have got out of sequence here, that has made things very challenging. And it's certainly requiring, I know there's a number of people working extraordinarily really hard at our end to supporting the WRC team to try and find a pathway through this one.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just, Jess, thanks for joining us this morning. In terms of the whole process here, I guess is there a learning here around, you know, the timing, and that I imagine we could have moved a bit faster with getting these agreements sorted, given that Waka Kotahi seemed to have proactively put this funding on hold. It knew this was coming, and yet now we're in a situation where, you know, councils have done a huge amount of work for potentially nothing, and it raised community. So yeah, just is there I guess we can't go back and change what's happened, but is there a learning we could take forward?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things. Just as a point of clarification, Waka Kotahi has not made any decisions. That there was a direction from the incoming government that they would expect that funding be paused, and the Ministry of Transport, as the holder of the appropriation, directed us to pause the funding. So hence, it's not our discretion, and hence trying to get exceptions to that is a relatively challenging process.
Right.
Is there lessons? I think absolutely there are some lessons for all of us, and I certainly include us in that, of the pace at which we move. I know that there were some real challenges around resourcing and changes in personnel, and that has meant that there was some probably lost in communication, but I think there is that opportunity. We really need to move at pace in these things to lock in the contracts and the paperwork and the admin side of things. But I know that there's been reflections of the challenges of doing this sort of work in a kind of election period and complex political environment, and the uncertainty that creates for all of us and for you guys is inherently very, very tricky, and creates a lot of risk. So.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for that clarification. So, yeah, and my other question was just to, I guess, to our staff, is there's a recommendation here that we continue, well, that we advocate for funding to continue, or what does it say? Continue to advocate for our transport program. But I mean, what does this look like in practice? Because there's not really like a specific step or
Okay.
anything.
If I can just make a comment here this afternoon, and I see Robert as implementation advisor for Future Proof is here. We happen to have a Future Proof Chief Executives Advisory Group meeting. So if the committee passed this recommendation today, we're going to have a discussion this afternoon in terms of what potentially implementing that resolution would look like. There may not be one single action, there may be a suite of actions around that. So I just wanted to share that with the committee, and it's actually quite timely having that meeting this afternoon, and then we'll come back and advise the committee where that implementation of that is happening. And also we have a Future Proof Implementation Committee meeting, I think it's the 8th of December. So we'll be talking about it again, and also any advice from the Chief Executives this afternoon.
Okay, excellent. That sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any other? Angela?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jess. I just had a slightly different question. Just, Jess, in your experience, this kind of thing, does this usually happen when a ministry gives direction, when there's a change of government, before a government is formed, rather than a minister? It just seems a bit out of step to me. Usually there's a bit more lag that we get between changes to allow for some of the completion of these smaller projects. It just seems a bit unusual that the ministry has taken this direction. If you could, if you have enough experience to go back in time. Yeah.
Look, I think it's been a challenging one. We've obviously had a direction or a guidance from the incoming government, but without a minister to have a conversation with, it's made it harder to nuance that conversation and to go back with questions and understand it. So based on the direction that we received, the decision was to pause the funding until that conversation could be had. Unusual. I possibly the period of time in which we've been in this was unexpected, and that has made it, I think, quite challenging. But the ministry made the decision based on the information, the guidance that that was given, and I think that has definitely been done before. I just think it's been challenging. It's been a long time between, which has meant that the uncertainty has sat longer than we'd hoped.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because some of the amounts, aren't huge. They're not hundreds of millions of dollars. It just seems a very unusual process, but I'll leave it at that, and I won't ask any more political questions of you. Thank you.
Okay, nothing further. Sarah and Phil, anything in conclusion?
No, other than I think you've got to fight for the program that you've spent the last 3 years investing your time and money in. That's kind of what Jess, I think, was also saying. We don't really want to start all over again. So it would be good to make sure that we do take those steps to continue to drive the program forward.
Here, Adrian.
Just in support of the regional council with them progressing this. Obviously, it's a timing issue. There was a risk there that was perhaps not perceived. You know, maybe it was a perceived risk. That, you know, like, is there an opportunity for us to? I guess does the recommendation in front of us actually recommend? You know, that we actually that the prioritise. Yeah. You know, like whether there's an opportunity, like obviously there's a program here, but we need to complete the things that have been committed, and whether that's captured in that, I just want to make sure it's captured in that recommendation. And I'm sure the committee will sort that, but I just feel that there's been a risk, it's become a risk that's popped up in front of the regional council and in Hamilton City. Yeah. So I think in unity as a group, I feel we need to support something there that at least we get, if it's not a go, that actually does go. If there's no money or there's only some money, that's what I'm worried about. It's just that strategic.
Yeah.
No, I was going to get Phil to make a
you
comment,
go.
but you aren't.
No, I was just going to say, I think that one voice from Future Proof is very powerful in Wellington, no matter who the government is. And thank you, Mayor Adrian, for that show of support. I'm sure it will be welcomed.
Phil, I was just going to ask you in terms of the matter that Mayor Adrian's raised regarding that potential prioritisation, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
or is that inherent in terms of
I think it is. The question is whether you want another line added to one of the statements here that you move that you continue to support this process continuing, and that would have to then go back to the lead organisations, I suppose.
I suppose that I would support adding a further statement around that specific initiative that we have already engaged in, as Councillor Thompson has raised, that we've made the good faith commitment and progressed these issues. We have instructed our organizations to act in accordance with those, with the faith that that we would have the support that was indicated. And so I'm just wondering if we want to specifically call out the and I'm not sure what elements we might want to call out. I'm just looking around. Well, I'm particularly looking at Hamilton City and my regional council colleagues to see if there were some specifics we wanted to reference in here.
What I was going to suggest to help this process, we need to take a break for a cup of tea.
Perfect.
Why don't we just leave this for the moment? Staff have heard the matters raised, and then when we reconvene after morning tea, we'll look forward to seeing recommendation 3. Okay, so we'll adjourn and we'll reconvene at 11 a.m.
It seems to be the only one that